I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume. So I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We're continuing in the Gospels again, right? We've been reading in John for the last several videos. We're back down in Jerusalem. This is during or just immediately after the Feast of Tabernacles, which is about 6 months before the next Passover and therefore the crucifixion. Christ has been spending a lot of time prior to coming to Jerusalem in instructing and teaching the apostles, preparing them for when they will be on their own, when he will be gone. Now, in these last few videos, we've been reading in John various controversies he has with the Jews, and there's a lot of controversy even among the Jews on whether or not he is the Christ, whether he is guilty of blasphemy, all this stuff. He's causing a big stir in Jerusalem. That's where we left it, and that's where we'll pick it up now in John chapter 9. In this video, we have a Joseph Smith translation. And what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. So John chapter 9, and we will be reading the entire chapter. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh, when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground, and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said unto him, Go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation, sent. He went his way, therefore, and washed, and came, seeing. Now, this is a fairly straightforward miracle. I mean, it's a kind of a performative one again, when he's making the clay out of spittle. Very odd. But the important thing here, the thing to really notice, is the apostles' question. Who did sin, this man or his parents? Now, this question, in and of itself, is based on an assumption that the man was capable of committing sin, which would result in his blindness. But note that he was blind from birth, which means that the question in and of itself is based on an assumption that he had lived before he was born and was capable of committing a sin before he was born, which would then result in him being born blind. This in and of itself shows that the apostles understood the pre-existence. They understood that we are spirit children of the Father, that we lived before this life. If we didn't live before this life, then the whole notion that this man could have sinned would make no sense. It wouldn't even enter their minds. The fact that they ask it shows that they understood. Let us continue. Verse 8. The neighbors, therefore, and they which before had seen him that he was blind, said, Is not this he that sat and begged? Some said, This is he. Others said, It is like him. But he said, I am he. Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? He answered and said, A man that is called Jesus made clay and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. Then said they unto him, Where is he? He said, I know not. So we have the starting of this controversy here, that people see him and say, wait a minute, aren't you the blind beggar? And some people, there's controversy there. Yeah, it kind of looks like him, but it can't be him. He was blind. This guy's not blind. But the guy said, no, that was me. You're seeing right. Well, how can you see then? Well, Jesus healed me. He explains to him, well, where is he? He doesn't know because he was blind. Jesus anointed him, told him to go wash in the pool. So he went and go washed in the pool, and he could see his sight, but he doesn't know where Jesus is anymore. But you know, there's already a controversy starting here. We can see the rumblings of controversy. Verse 13. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind, and it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and anointed his eyes. Then again the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. He said unto them, He put clay upon mine eyes, and I washed and do see. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, This man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them. They say unto the blind man again, What sayest thou of him, that he hath opened thine eyes? He said, He is a prophet. But the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind and received his sight, until they called the parents of him that had received his sight. And they asked them, saying, Is this your son, whom ye say was born blind? How then doth he now see? His parents answered them and said, We know that this is our son, and that he was born blind. But by what means he now seeth, we know not. Or who hath opened his eyes, we know not. He is of age, ask him. He shall speak for himself. These words spake his parents because they feared the Jews. For the Jews had agreed already that if any man did confess that he was Christ, he should be put out of the synagogue. Therefore said his parents, He is of age, ask him. So here's our controversy. He healed the man on the Sabbath. So he is once again violating the Sabbath by healing. And he had the man go and wash his own eyes. Can't do that on the Sabbath either. So we got this horrible violation of the Sabbath. But the man was healed. And we got the people saying, oh, well, if he's doing it on the Sabbath, he can't be from God. But the others say, wait a minute. He did it, though. Could anybody that is not of God do this? And we get this kind of division. And so they started, oh, well, maybe he didn't really heal. Maybe it's all just a trick. It's a fraud. And this guy wasn't really blind. He's just pretending he was. And so they call his parents and say, no, everybody knows that our son was born blind, and that is our son. But note here that the Pharisees have already made the agreement that anybody who confesses Christ will be put out of the synagogue. Now that means basically that you're going to be excommunicated from the Jewish religion. Disfellowship to the very least, likely excommunicated. That's what they're talking about. And this is what they are afraid of, because if that happens, you're not just not allowed to attend church on Sunday, you're basically ostracized from the people. You're not going to be able to engage in trade. You're not going to be able to do all the stuff that you would normally do in society because you have been thrown out of the synagogue. That's what we're talking about. That's why the parents are afraid. They say, we're not saying anything. He's of age. Let him speak for himself. In other words, he's old enough. He is his own man. He is no longer under our authority. And in this way, his parents are kind of just passing the buck to him. Let our son get in trouble if he wants to. That's on him. That's his choice. We're not going to stick up for him. We're not going to get in trouble with him. Verse 24. Then again called they the man that was blind, and said unto him, Give God the praise. We know that this man is a sinner. He answered and said, Whether he be a sinner or no, I know not. One thing I know, that whereas I was blind, now I see. Then said they to him again, What did he to thee? How opened he thine eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and ye did not hear. Wherefore would ye hear it again? Will ye also be his disciples? Then they reviled him, and said, Thou art his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spake unto Moses. As for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. The man answered and said unto them, Why herein is a marvelous thing, that ye know not from whence he is, and yet he hath opened mine eyes. Now we know that God heareth no sinners. But if any man be a worshipper of God, and doeth his will, him he heareth. Since the world began, was it not heard that any man opened the eyes of one that was born blind? If this man were not of God, he could do nothing. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sins, and dost thou teach us? And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he found him, he said unto him, Dost thou believe on the Son of God? He answered and said, Who is he, Lord, that I might believe on him? And Jesus said unto him, Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talketh with thee. And he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. So the Pharisees bring the guy in. They argue, how did he heal you? I've already told you, and you didn't listen. I'm not telling you again. That's what the guy says. You're not listening. And they try to contend with this guy. Oh, we know this guy's a sinner. He can't be a prophet. And they go, I don't know, but he healed me. That's good enough for me. I know that if this guy wasn't with God, he wouldn't have been able to heal me, and he healed me. So, and they can't say anything against him. They can't actually refute what this man is saying, so they just kick him out. They kick him out of the synagogue. Christ then hears about it, and he goes looking for him, and the man joins Christ. It shows the Jews don't really, well, the Pharisees, I don't want to say all the Jews, but the Pharisees are trying desperately to prove that Jesus is not the Christ, because if he is the Christ, then they know that their hypocrisy and their wickedness is being called out, and they don't like it. But if they can prove him to be a sinner, they can prove him to be not of God, then they can justify themselves. That's what they're trying to do, and they are failing. And they can't stand the fact that they're failing. Anyways, let's read the last few verses here, verse 39. And Jesus said, For judgment am I come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words, and said unto him, Are we blind also? Jesus said unto them, If ye were blind, ye should have no sin. But now ye say, We see, therefore your sin remaineth. You know, Christ is telling the Pharisees, if you know the law, then you are guilty. If you can claim ignorance, then that's a different story. But you say you know the law, and therefore you are guilty. Now, we're going to briefly look at the Joseph Smith translation here. There are half a dozen corrections here. The most important one is in verse 4. Verse 4 is now rendered, I must work the works of him that sent me while I am with you. The time cometh when I shall have finished my work, then I go unto the Father. So it is not that the night cometh when no man can work. He's talking about, I've got a work to do, and I've got a limited amount of time to do it. And eventually my time's going to be up, and then I go back to the Father. Now, verse 13, we also have this. And they brought him who had been blind to the Pharisees. Just to clarify, it reads a little better. No change in meaning. Verse 17, instead of that he hath opened thine eyes, it's who hath opened your eyes. So they're not asking him about, they're saying, what about this man? They're asking who he is. They're saying, who did this? Who is the one that did this? And all the guy can say is, well, it was a prophet. Now we have, let's go down here first, verse 29. Instead of as for this fellow, it is as for this man. And on verse 32, open the eyes of one that was blind, that was born blind, except he be of God. That's a little addition on the end. They're showing Christ wasn't the first one necessarily to do this miracle, but this is something that Satan can't duplicate. It is a miracle that only God has ever been able to perform. Now we go back to verse 27. This is interesting here. He answered them, I have told you already, and ye did not believe. Wherefore would you believe if I should tell you again, and would you be his disciples? So instead of hear, it's believe. If I tell you again, is it going to change your opinion? No. So what's the point? We leave that here. We are going to read a little bit more in John again, but then I believe we are turning back to Luke for a number of videos. So I will see you there.